Hello, everyone, and welcome to Friends of the Force. I'm your host, Sarah.
And I'm your host, Brad.
And on today's episode, guys, it's the moment you've all been waiting for, presumably, if you've clicked on the episode. And also because if you look at the date, you know we're a little bit behind our regular time that we get these out, but it's okay. Thank you for your patience. It's our episode on Convergence by Zoraida Córdova. The High Republic book discussions are back, and we are here with our final book discussion in Wave 1 of Phase 2. I'm so glad I did that right on the first try.
Yeah.
How are you feeling, Brad, that we are now through all 3 books in this phase? In the wave. Oh, I messed it up.
Oh, see, you had a good streak there going. You kind of screwed me up because you led with the wave first instead of the phase, which we've discussed quite a bit this year. We started with Book of Boba Fett, and here we are with the High Republic closing out the year. I'm feeling spectacular about the High Republic right now. Getting through all 3 books, we have received our Battle for Jedha advanced copies, so we're going to be diving into that very shortly after we record this episode, and once we've have cleared our minds of all the details that we've been trying to retain in that pea-sized brain of ours, in our single brain cell that we have and we share.
Yeah. It's really working overtime to maintain all these details of this book because we're a bit late.
I can't start a new book until we do these because I'm gonna start blurring the lines, and also we're gonna speculate a little bit today about what's next. So we wanted to keep that speculation nice and fresh. So full disclaimer there, but yeah, I think Phase 2, Wave 1 is spectacular. I love, as we've been talking, how this phase is not just giving us answers to things that will be important, but also developing character and fleshing out the galaxy in a new time period and with new technologies and new philosophies. And the Jedi Order looks a little bit different. The Nihil are not around, but there are still threats lurking in the galaxy. So that is a really interesting premise on its own. And I think Convergence is yet another successful installment within the High Republic, and Zoraida Córdova, who, if you haven't checked out our interview with her from last month on the day the book came out, definitely do so. But she had such a fantastic debut for this era, previously writing Crash of Fate. I think this was such a strong start for her, and I hope and I presume she will be brought back to write more Star Wars in the future. So that is very exciting.
She better.
Yeah.
I love her book.
Yeah.
I really do.
So I'm super jazzed about this book, and I'm very excited to be talking about the 4 core characters of this book, as well as some overarching themes and things that are at play within this story.
Right. And this, what's so interesting about this title and about this wave and this phase, even though we haven't gotten the second part of it yet, is really just how different from Phase 1 it has been. I think upon closing this book, I was like, oh, this is really quite different than what we got in Phase 1. Because if you remember all the way back to early 2021, right?
Yeah, High Republic is almost 2 years old. It's crazy, right?
Whoa. Okay. So if you think all the way back to January 2021, when we got Light of the Jedi and we got punched in the face by character death every 2 seconds, we learned so many names and so many of those people died. And we had to get a huge crash course into the world of the High Republic. And it was a big and a galactic sized event. Yeah, and it was huge. And this phase seems to be so much smaller, and not in a negative way. I mean, it's telling a much more focused set of stories, which is so interesting within this time period, because I don't think it's what any of us quite expected from Phase 2. But I'm really, enjoying it, enjoying the change in pace, enjoying the change in perspective. And I think that this book, along with the other ones that we read and have already discussed, just gave us some really interesting ideas to chew on and some great characters to fall in love with. So yeah, I feel good about it. It's different. And I like that because it's hitting on some of the other things in Star Wars that I really enjoy.
And not only characters for us to fall in love with, but also characters to fall in love with each other, because there's been a lot of romance.
Beautiful. Excellent transition.
I know. Oh my gosh. I mean, Path of Deceit. There's no romance in Quest for the Hidden City necessarily, but I'm sure there are ships that people have in their minds, and Path of Deceit was a banger. Was a banger.
R.I.P. No context.
Right. But Convergence, I mean, it's wild to think that. Well, I guess a bit of news. The High Republic Phase 3 has been confirmed to be starting next
Oh,
November. So that's exciting.
next November. You practically mean this November. In
Oh
like 11 months
gosh.
from now. Oh my God. Time is, you know what? I realized I checked my email inbox today and I found something that somebody sent to me a year ago that I was planning to like work on, look at, read, and I haven't. And I had no idea that whole
Whoopsies.
year. It wasn't like anybody was expecting a response, but like it was just something that somebody sent my way. And it's been a whole year and I haven't
Yeah.
forgotten about it. But I went, oh my God, it's been a year. It's like I was just like organizing my like nightstand and I found a check from last year that I never cashed from like Christmas last year.
Oops.
Oops. And I
Can't
was like,
take
wait a
that one to
second.
the bank.
No, I was like, wait a second. It's been an entire year. How
Oh
did that
man.
happen? Yeah, so time moves really weird, and which means that phase 3 is going to be upon us like tomorrow, practically.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of tomorrow, really April, because that's when we're gonna
Right.
probably get our first look at Phase 3 potentially,
Right.
or maybe some previews of it. I mean, I think Celebration will mostly be a Phase 2, Wave 2 sort of
Mm.
push, but maybe some inklings of what to expect with Phase 3, and then San Diego Comic-Con will really be like the big showcase of
Mm.
here's what's coming for Phase 3. So that's what I really
I
anticipate next
can't
year
even
bringing.
believe that.
But also that means we're gonna be reunited with Elzar Mann and Avar Chris very soon. Like, as much as I've loved
And not
Phase
Stellan
2,
Skarsgård.
unfortunately not. I love the distance that we've had because it almost feels like it feels like we're waiting in between movies. You know, like when I saw Fellowship of the Ring and like waiting that year for the Two Towers to come out, like felt like
Bro,
the
you were like
longest
5.
time. I remember what I was there. I remember. I remember watching the newly released DVD because DVDs were a thing at the time, and that was like
DVDs are
on
still
the
a
on
thing,
that was on the
just to be
precipice of
clear.
like Attack of the Clones got a VHS release. So I had the VHS of Attack of the Clones, but I had the
Mm,
DVD of Fellowship of the Ring. So it was like
mm.
a weird turning point. But it's exciting because it's like we're gonna return to those characters and feel like it's been so long, but it's like how long has it been for them? Like, will they be changed?
Oh,
Will there have been a time jump of some sort? Are they dealing with
uh-huh.
those consequences in the immediate aftermath, or is it months later, or is it years later? Right? Like, how are they dealing with
Yeah.
this? So I'm just so excited to be reuniting with those characters. But let's not look ahead too soon though, because we're still
Wait,
here.
no. No, but I would like I hold on. I like to say something. I like to respond to your comment because
Okay.
I will
Yes.
say that like as much as I am enjoying this phase and like getting to know these new characters and like getting this smaller story, I do feel like we've come to expect the bigger story and so I find myself a little bit like missing Elzar and Avar
Oh, totally.
and
Yeah.
150 years in the future. I find myself itching to know like what's going on with them. And so as much as I'm enjoying these and it totally makes sense within like the structure of how Star Wars has worked and with trilogies and that sort of thing. And just to give better context to phase 3, this totally makes sense. But I do find myself going, Elzar baby, what you up to? Like,
Mhm.
Elzar, are you okay? Buriaga, where are you at?
Where are you
I'm
at,
worried.
bro?
Oh, I'm worried for you, my son.
He's floating
Avar,
in
Elzar,
space inside of
are
a
you
Wrath
going to
Tar.
kiss? Are you going to
Yeah.
kiss? But yeah, no, I find myself itching to go back to that time frame too. So I'm enjoying this where we are now, but I'm also like, November? Can I
It's
like wake
close.
me up when October ends?
Yeah, why not? Why not? We
Thank
can
you.
we can make that our anthem for the rest of the year. So
Sing a little
yeah,
Green Day. Yeah.
yeah, of course. I think
Anyway,
Battle for Jeddah though is going to be a huge,
it's
a
gonna slap.
huge turning point. I think
It's
that
gonna
is going to
slap.
be like phase 2 went from like 60 to 100. Like
You
it's
know
that.
what? You
I think
might
it's
be
going to be that
right.
big. Yeah.
Because book 2 by Lydia Kang of the adult novels is called Cataclysm, which that's a big, big bad word, you know?
Path of
Big bad word.
Vengeance,
Path of
Quest for Planet X,
Vengeance.
a race
Vengeance.
for Planet X.
Cataclysm. Cataclysm and Vengeance. You're right. Battle of Jeddah is going to be the big turning point. I'm like, oh, the
Yeah.
story's so small, but like I'm literally going to be proved wrong in like a week.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I
That's
can't
okay.
wait. I
I'll
can't
take it.
wait.
I'll take it.
But yes, while we're still in phase 2, let's simmer in it. Let's enjoy it and let's talk about it. But before we do that, we have our independent bookstore of the week as we always do. So
We
Sarah,
do.
take us over to your neck of the woods if you would.
Quite literally, really. So I have finally decided to share my bookstore with all of y'all. And this week's bookstore of the week, drumroll, is Anderson's Bookshop. Anderson's Bookshop is a local bookstore in the Chicago suburbs. They have a location in Naperville and a location in Downers Grove, in Illinois. And the Anderson's Bookshop is owned by the Anderson family. They are sixth generation, like booksellers and store owners in the Naperville area. They're all woman owned. And in a few years, they're going to go on 150 years of selling books in the community. It started as a pharmacy that also had, and then later they had like a book section, and then they had a bookstore on top of the pharmacy called Paperback Paradise. And now it is all just Anderson's Bookshops. And they also own the pharmacy as a separate company. Anyway, that's too much information. But Anderson's is, I'm really passionate about it. Anderson's is kind of like a hub in the Chicagoland area for author events, for school visits, and for book fairs. And I am really proud of the store. I care a lot about it. You can shop Anderson's Bookshops online. And let me tell you, they got Star Wars books. I would know. My recommendations are on the shelves of the Star Wars books. So
Spreading the good word of the High Republic and all things Star Wars.
That's right. And
I appreciate it.
You best know that Rebecca Roanhorse's books also have recs on them, and Zoraida's books, and all the High Republic authors, and all the Star Wars authors, and all my favorite romance authors. My recs are everywhere. But yes, Star Wars books galore. What else can I say about this store?
We're not even getting that Disney paycheck. We just love these books that much.
It's true. It's true. Also, in 2007, they were named one of Chicago's 10 best bookstores. In 2011, they won Publisher Weekly Bookstore of the Year. In 2019, they were Mental Floss's best bookstore in Illinois. I'm very proud of the shop. They are andersonsbookshop.com. Thank you. I will step off the soapbox. I didn't know I was going to get that hyped, but I really do.
How long have you been holding that in for? I feel like that's been bottling up inside of you, and now it's just
well, it's been bottling it's been bottling since we started Bookstore of the Week.
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, but I don't work there full time anymore, so that's why I feel comfortable sharing that.
Well, for those of you listening, if you can support Anderson's Bookstore, you guys do have online ordering.
Yes.
So go check them out online.
Mail, so
yes,
you're going to get your books quickly.
And even though it's past the holidays, still be buying your books from indie bookstores all over the country. If you can find one in your local area,
all over the world. There are bookstores
Anderson's,
all over the world.
That is true. That is very true. Very true. So, I guess with that being said, Sarah, you broke your ceasefire to talk about Anderson's Bookshop. So
wow, you're so good at this. You're so good at this.
I'm trying. We're gonna jump over to a different ceasefire that hasn't been broken quite yet, over on the planets of Eiram and E'ronoh. So we're talking about Convergence.
Amazing work.
I know. We're talking about Convergence by Zoraida Córdova. So this will be a spoiler discussion, as always, here at Friends of the Force. If you haven't read the book, we really encourage you to do so. If you want to sit tight,
it's good. You'll like it.
Learn about some of the themes and some of the characters, and then go experience for yourself, even if you might know what happens. Feel free to do that as well. But I really do encourage, and we both do encourage you to read it first and experience it, because it is a treat. It is a delicacy of Star Wars writing.
Dude,
and
Zoraida,
we're so lucky.
Zoraida, she's just good at this, man. She's just good
She's
at this.
She's so damn good at this. She's so brilliant.
Here's the other thing is, like, this is only her second adult novel outside of like her romance novels. Like, so like adult more general fiction. Queen. I don't know. I'm a fan. I'm a fan. It's true.
She was on our short list of authors that we wanted to see join the High Republic.
That's true.
And she did. And now here we are talking about the book. So that is so exciting. And without further ado, let's jump into our conversation about it. So Spoilers ahead. Sarah,
Yeah.
what did you think about Convergence, Phase 2, Wave 1, adult novel from Del Rey? What did you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, good. I mean, as I mentioned up top, like this book and this phase so far is a lot different than what I expected. And I think that's so what's so interesting about it is we are ending on the adult novel. And I really do think that this was the right way for us to, the order for us to have read these books in. And I understand that that's kind of the order they intended. But it's weird to feel like we flipped the script a little bit. But this is definitely a book where you want to know what the path of the open hand is and who the mother is, because when they show up, the mother specifically, you're like, excuse
She bad.
excuse
She
me.
bad.
Yeah, there was a text I sent Brad when somebody, a big mess of a man, Axel Greylark.
And we're not talking about Elzar Man. We got a new mess of a man for Phase 2.
Thank God. Need messy men in our fictional universes.
This is man at one N.
One N. And Axel Greylark called up the mother, and I was like, I'm gonna kill him. I was so mad.
You were so like disappointed mom mode.
I was like, I'm gonna kill him. But really, murder. But I also, by the end of this book, was like, I can fix him. He's a mess and I can fix him. No, I just thought this book was really enjoyable. We talked about it, I think, throughout phase one is and in other books is our kind of love for Star Wars politics and the role that they play within Star Wars, and also just getting to explore political ideas in the realm of Star Wars, because it's a complicated galaxy out there. And we've got that in such things as Bloodline and in the High Republic, and also in Alphabet Squadron books, we kind of touch on these political themes and ideas, Lost Stars, whatever. But this book hits on politics a lot harder than I expected it to. I thought we were going to lean really hard into the action and the pace was going to be really fast throughout. And while it was fast paced, it wasn't because it was completely action heavy. It was just because the story moved really well. And so I found that to be really interesting, and the politics at the forefront, this conversation about peace really exists at the core of this book, which I thought was great. And different from what I expected in a positive way. I don't know where I was going with that thought, but politics good, Axel Greylark messy, characters good, romance
Very good, yeah.
This wasn't a romance novel by any means, any stretch of the imagination, but we do have these romantic threads that are getting like pulled on here with our lead characters, which I'm really enjoying because it's kind of at the center of the story. So that was really fun.
And as we talked to Zoraida, she had that same point that it is not a true romance novel. If you want that, go read Princess and the Scoundrel. That's more
That'll get you a little closer.
Yeah. But this is a love story, which I think she kind of alluded to. Like, this is a story about love and like what love can do and how love can unify people, how love has unified these two planets in the past 200 years ago. During what was called their greatest age, which I think that's so interesting. These two planets had their almost golden age, their own high republic themselves, right? Because we're 200 years in the past during the golden age of the Jedi, and then Eiram-E'ronoh had their 200 years ago golden age. So there's a little bit of meta happening there, but love being the sort of unifying power within a galaxy that is full of war, full of pirates, full of dangers and nameless terrors. Like, at the core of it, if you can find love and champion that, like, what is possible, what sort of peace can be brought from that, and that's the heart of the story. And that was not something I was expecting. I knew, like, going into this, knowing Zoraida as somebody who does love the enemies to lovers trope, and she is a big romance fan, to see the finished product and to see like how much thought she actually put into it, and like even more than I ever could have imagined, how amazing it was, and how love and like friendship and kinship and all these things like flow together so well. It was a beautiful story. And then on top of that, she's packing like murder mystery elements into it as well. Like it sort of becomes a whodunit at one point, trying to find a killer and unraveling a plot. And you have like all these little like subplots that are happening on the side with the path of the open hand, and with the ferals who are sort of poisonous beings in the ear of the monarch, and
Literally.
the way that she was able to juggle all of those together, but it never felt like too much. It never felt too
Mhm.
confusing. I thought was so excellent. Like she just hit all the points she needed to, and she did it so eloquently and like just succinctly. It worked. I never felt the pacing was off with this.
Right, and, yeah, like, that's why I think the pacing is so good because it gives you what it needs to give you. It doesn't give you too much. It's not, like, overwrought with details or, weight that it doesn't need. It really gives you exactly what it needs to give you. It gives us the characters that we need to know, and while the cast is big, our core is quite small, and so we kind of get to follow the same people throughout, which is great as well because it keeps us moving, so yeah.
Oh yeah, well to your point earlier too, Light of the Jedi introduced us to so many characters, but I also love the focus that this book had on just the four
Right.
core characters of Axel, Gella, um, Bantu, and Ziri, and the sort of friendships that form between them throughout the book, despite their personality clashes and this journey that they go on throughout E'ronoh and being the bait for the murderer, right? And so I think for me, like where some people might see that as where the book slowed down, I actually feel like that's where the book shine the most because that's where
Mm,
the most growth happens for those characters, and that they are on this journey together, trekking through this world, finding different factions, different peoples who they have to interact with and overcome or be challenged by, and the vulnerability that comes with that journey with each other, like opening up about symbols for their people, like the shark or the scorpion or the Jedi who walks the seam of the galaxy, like all those things that they open up about and they grow closer because of it. Like I think that part of this book echo that sort of character dynamics that we saw in the Alphabet Squadron
mm,
trilogy. Like sort of the we're sitting on a cruiser right before battle, kind of around our lamps and our food, and we're kind of just shooting the shit, knowing this could be our last hurrah sort of thing, like let's
right.
open up with each other. Um so I don't know. I just really I love that part of the book especially, and I think on my reread, I'm most excited to revisit that part as well.
I think something else that's really interesting about this book in particular, because Path of Deceit is all about the Force in its own weird way. This is not a book about the Force or even the Jedi, like at all.
With the exception of Gela and her journey within the Force.
Yeah, but it's
But
not a book
but the
about the
Force is
Jedi.
not the
It's a
folk.
it's a
Yeah, yeah.
personal story about the Force, but it's not about the Force as an idea, and it's not about the Jedi as an institution or as an
Correct.
idea.
Like
It's
not in
just
the way
about
that
like
like Path of Deceit tackles that idea.
right. Or
Yeah.
or even all of phase 1 where they're wrestling with like the Force becoming nothingness through the nameless and the Force being soured and can the Jedi handle any of that? This is a book that is like more like a coming of age story. Like a what is my place in the world story as opposed to a story about the Force or the Jedi. And I found that to be really interesting too, because again, that's so much more centered, so much more focused than kind of those big questions can be at times. So I thought it was curious because we have our main character who's on the cover holding her lightsabers, and you expect maybe a certain thing from Star Wars, and it just decided to give me something totally different from what I expected on the cover, which was great because I love all that stuff. But it was something I definitely caught me by surprise.
Sarah, you mentioned the cover of the book and like what sort of
Yeah.
expectation you might have going into that. Can we talk about the title for a second? The idea of convergence, like what is the
Yes.
convergence
Yes.
happening? So the Merriam-Webster definition of convergence, and yes, I did whip out my dictionary because we are talking titles, so I have to. But it says the independent development of similarities between separate cultures, and like
Ooh,
what a to the point line you can draw between that and this
that's
book,
so
because the separate
apt.
cultures being the two planets, and the similarities being this princess and this prince, right? Like these two people who sort of share the same outlook in a way, and it's not until they sort of have a crash of fate, they have a crash of fate where they get linked up and they grow on each other and they realize like maybe despite viewing each other as enemies for so long, we're not so different. Like our
Mhm.
peoples face the same struggle, like where we have a drought, you guys have, your own issues as well. And like we each are facing our own challenges. And this war is worsening those challenges to an even higher degree. So it's like, how can we figure out like to pave that better future for a war that's been fought for generations? And that's like another idea as well, is like this is a war that's been passed down from grandparents now onto grandchildren, and potentially, if nothing is done, to even more generations moving forward. And I thought that was so at the forefront of this book, and just like the idea of who is responsible for war and who is responsible for fixing it. And that's something that we see in our own worlds as we face like environmental disaster and we're on the precipice of that. It's like, who is going to deal with those consequences and who has to fix that issue. Likewise, I think here Ziri and Fansu are like the first people to really say like, no, like we want to take this into our own hands. Like we control the destinies of our people and our planets. And like we're saying this is enough. Um, and yeah, I thought that was just like really interesting. And her Ziri in the meeting room saying like, this is not like your guys' future. This is our future. And so like
Mm.
we're gonna do something about it no matter what you think or like what you feel is in your best interests. Like you're not even a part of this conversation anymore. Like we're doing this.
Right, and it's so interesting too because we find out that, all of the libraries, on E'ronoh were destroyed in the first years of the war. So the knowledge of the past and the knowledge of peace is not something that Ziri knows or that is acknowledged or discussed on E'ronoh. And so it's something that she only learns about when she's on the Paxion and in the library on the Paxion reading this history book and learning about this marriage that aligned these two planets. And like that is sad to me because the knowledge was destroyed and the people want to forget too, about peace because war is easier and a stronger motivator and something righteous, something to fight for. We're fighting for us. And over the generations it's all become so flattened, so us versus them, that it really takes Ziri and Fantu meeting, and Fantu's hospitality, and ultimately this peace summit, and then this acquired knowledge, and then Ziri's declaration of intent. Hey, we're going to fix it. For any of this to happen is for them to have a human connection with one another, and everything had become so flattened, and they didn't even see the other, the group they were fighting against as people.
Yeah, because
Um,
how easy is it to build up your enemy as a sort of faceless
right,
entity that is like, yeah, like you said, us versus them, and
right.
to do that for so many generations. There's this quote here from Ziri, which I thought was pretty tragic. As she says, quote, she was picking up the war her grandparents had fought. It was a cycle of never ending war and violence. War was her inheritance. War was constant, not peace, not this Eiram-E'ronoh hospitality. And so it's almost like a culture shock in a way when she is there and she's like, I should just kill myself. I should turn the knife, I should turn the dagger, and I should stab myself and die a hero's death. And she realizes, okay, well, maybe that's the last thing that I should do for my people is to give in. Like maybe there's more I can learn, more I can barter, more I can figure out by being here. Um, and so I really loved how the story played into that idea that, like, again, maybe your enemies are not who you think they are, and you have sort of been fighting the straw man war forever, the forever war as it's called.
Yeah, and the power of just human connection, the power of sitting down with somebody and taking a second even to look past a difference. And is everybody going to agree all the time? Is everybody going to agree most of the time? No, perhaps not. Are you going to come to a conclusion that's favorable all the time? No, no, no. But is there the possibility of a hint of understanding that could lead to something greater? It's like, yeah. And I think that's what Ziri ultimately gets. And as Ziri, she's always been in this war. She's not an actively consenting participant in this war. She just was born into it. We live in a society kind of a deal. And so her being able to like make a different choice, I think is a powerful one. And we talk about like who's responsible for peace, and in our own world and in our fictional world, and it's the young people, the people who can see a better future, see a different future, people who haven't been jaded, and that's typically younger people. Incrementalism, boo. you live enough years and you're like, oh, incrementalism, it's the only way. And young people, and like Ziri, she's like, no, actually no, I'm gonna marry this fairly handsome man who I do not really have a relationship with yet, and we're gonna just make peace happen. Bye.
She's like, enough is enough. We're done with the
Yeah.
story. We're done with this narrative, which I love.
No,
I love that
I mean,
for her.
and that's what she's doing, and she's had to balance this narrative of like her being a princess and her being a captain of her Thial squad. Oh wow, that is more difficult to say than I thought it was. Thial Fire Squadron. Okay, we're gonna have to say that at a particular pace, or else it's gonna get goofed. But like
A little bit tougher than Alphabet Squadron.
Thial Fire.
Thial
Zoraida,
Fire.
what were you thinking? Mark Thompson had to say that like 1,000 times. But like she's kind of having to balance these very different identities for herself, that she was born into both of them essentially, and they both come with a lot of responsibility, and like how can she pave her own path in that? And I think that like this is her way to do that.
Yeah, and also going against what her father being the monarch and being the presiding power, and sort of shifting that scale of power as somebody who is going to be the future monarch when she assumes that role from him. The way that she was raised with him is quite toxic. The way that he parented his children, there's a part in here that talks about how he used to tell her, "Get up, my heart, you are Thial Fire made, and the scorpion does not cry." Right. And so it's when she proposes this solution to marry Fonsu and to unite the two worlds that he starts crying, and she throws those words back at him. Hide your emotions and maybe like your passion, and be a little bit reserved, and be that hardened like soldier that you're supposed to be as a general, as a commander of the fleet. Right. And so I think her coming to the table with this was really her showing who she is on the inside, like what she wants, and actually speaking for her own wants rather than like what the people around her want and what the people around her expect her to give in return. Right. So I thought that was interesting as well. It was a really triumphant moment for Ziri to like stand up to that patriarchy that's sort of been in power for a while.
Right. And we talk about, the death of her brother as well, which set the monarch kind of on a path of, grief and pain and anger, and his parenting style shifted to be more troublesome towards her, and he struggled in a lot of different ways. And then she got the promotion as captain, and there were men around her who didn't think she should have been captain, over them. So there's like a lot of layers happening in her life. Did we say this quote? Everyone is looking to him to make things right, but in the end, it'll be me. I'm the one who has to fix it because it's my war when he's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great line.
And that one, I think is just really, that's the struggle of all ongoing things, climate, war, et cetera, like that's the struggle. And yeah, I think Ziri is kind of navigating a difficult existence, one where she can't show the full shades of herself. And I think ultimately, like, while in some ways, what's the cost of peace? And like, I think that's a really interesting idea too, because like the cost of peace can be, to some people, their dignity, their righteousness about the fight that they're fighting. The cost of peace can be a freedom that you once enjoyed. Or it could be nothing, or, minuscule ideas. But the cost of peace for Ziri in some ways is like her independence. as like a single person, but at the same time she's gaining Fontu and like she's gaining this responsibility. So like the responsibility can be good or bad, right? Peace and ruling both worlds, good or bad. But she's gaining a partner who is really uh, a compassionate person who grew up in a way that was both similar to her and a lot different from her. Um, so I think there's like this idea of like what is the cost of peace is different for an everyday person and also for the royals, uh, people in charge. It's interesting. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just talking.
Well, you make a great point too about her masked existence and how she's sort of had to keep
Mm,
that up for a while. And I think that's something that all four characters are dealing with. I want to point to specifically the quote from Axel Greylark when he gets bailed out by his mom and they're back at the apartment. And he's reflecting on some of the harmful things that he said in his past about how, it should have been you, not dad, and you weren't there for us and that sort of thing. And he tells her, know that I'm different now, mother. Perhaps not the son you imagined I'd be, but the son you have. And I was like, oh my gosh. I felt that on a personally deep level. I felt that.
mm,
But
mm,
also that speaks volumes to the expectations that parents or older generations than us can put within the younger generation, the upcoming generation, as we talk about a generational shift on who bears the brunt of this war. And it is these relatively speaking younger kids. It's Ziri and Fontu, and Fontu being somebody who was living on the streets and was rescued by Queen Adriella and Odelia, her partner, and they took him in. And sort of he has to wear this mask of like, I'm a royal, even though I come from the quote unquote like kind of slums of Eiram, right? And Gella, who is somebody who has to put on the mask of leadership in her first mission, and she fails. And she makes a horrible
mm.
mistake, and it throws her
Right,
back into this
right.
mission to learn how to be part of a team. And
Mhm.
so she's trying to be perfect. She thinks everybody above her wants her to be perfect because she doesn't have parents, right? It's the Jedi Order that she answers to. Um, and she has to sort of deal with the idea that being imperfect is part of the journey, and that's okay. It's okay to be imperfect, and that's something that Creighton's son
Mhm.
tells her. So I love that all these characters are dealing with this sort of similar issue of like identity and defying expectations
Right.
of those you have been answering to for a while. And I think that's really powerful because like, are we going to let others, are we going to be in the passenger seat of our destiny, or do we want to take the driver's seat and carve out our own path? And that's what all four of these characters do, like whether for good or for bad. And we'll get into that with Axel, specifically the bad.
But yeah, but yeah, I mean, you make a great point. Like, this is such an intimate book. This is such a small story because, the real conflict is like, who are you going to be? Not what is the galaxy going to be? What is the force going to be? It's like, who are you going to be? And like, I think that's integral to all of, stories with characters. Who are you going to be? But, that's the real story at the heart of this is like, what path are you going to blaze? What trail are you going to blaze on your life. And yeah, Axel, he's not making the best choices for himself. And that's where I think I can fix him. In this essay, I will.
You can't fix him. You can't fix him.
I can
But
fix
that's
any
okay.
fictional man. I can fix any fictional man.
You can keep
You know
believing that. I
why?
don't know about Axel.
They
Why is that?
they don't exist.
That's true. You can fix them in your mind, and you can commit
Exactly.
yourself to that belief.
And
Yeah.
that's what fan fiction's for.
Oh boy.
Anyway.
I do want to make one other observation as well, just in terms of the people of these planets and how they might perceive the war or the other side. I think that's really, really exemplified through Blythe Tevin, who is a pilot that we meet right in the beginning of the book
Oh.
and is one of those characters that is very short lived. But also Zoraida includes like a point of view snippet in there that just rips your heart out and stomps it on
Thinks
the
about his
ground.
mom. He thinks about his mom and then he
Yeah.
dies.
Yeah. Oh man. What a flip of the script there. The mom's not dead, the child is, right? A mother who has lost both of her kids now to this war. Because Bly Tevin lost his sister. And he was sort of the one that now is like, okay, well, I'm going to commit to the cause because my sister never got to like live out her days as a soldier and as a fighter. And yeah, in those final moments, he's thinking of his mother, who is quote thin and sad, stirring a pot of soup after his sister fell from the sky, and
Oh, Jesus
he
Christ.
thinks of the
Oh,
fact that he wants to finish what she started, but also what their grandfather started when he's fought as a young man, right? So again, there's the idea of the generations getting passed down to the next of kin, and
right.
um, it says Bly always wanted to see the blue waters of Eiram, even though it was a place he was supposed to hate,
Ah!
right? The last thought was of his mother because she always wanted to see the turquoise seas of the enemy sea, right?
Ah!
So I think that's
Don't
really
edit any of
interesting
my
because
thoughts out. Ah! Now you can talk.
I think it's interesting because there's clearly a desperation of sorts for these people to see the other side, even though they know it's a place they're supposed to hate or that they've been taught to hate, and they don't quite know why, but they still want to see the beauty of that world regardless, right?
That's what sows the seeds of change, right? When things are generational, it's when people start to ask, wait, why do we act like this? Why do we feel this way? Why do we have this opinion? And the elders are not able to give them a real answer that satisfies them.
Mhm. Yeah, the hatred is like baked into their collective subconscious, really.
Right, but it's taught, and then the reasons get lost, and it's just even though the reasons may not be justified in the first place, it just continues because it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecy feelings, fear and
Mhm.
anger and hate. They just spin in your mind, and like that. But even though Bly was fighting this war and had this specific position, he realized, like, I don't understand why the enemy is all bad. I still want to understand more why, like, who they are. I
Mhm.
just know to hate them and I don't know why.
They make a point during their negotiations, which are a total shit show, by the way, but they read off, I think one side reads off the names of all the soldiers that have been lost to the war, and
Yeah.
that's like one of the days, right? And so it is really just tragic to see how long this has lasted, and like you said, like how long it took them to just be like, stop, let's take a step back and think about this for a second. We are sitting at the same table. We all want the same thing, but
Maybe.
we all see it very differently, right? Like you guys think that we took your colony and sold it to the Circa Corporation, but from our point of view, you stopped paying your taxes or your
Right.
whatever it was, right? So that's why we took the land back.
It's a
And
lease
then
on the
one fight
land.
happens, some bombs drop on some civilians, and then it's just the rest is history. It's
Right.
just like, gosh damn it, like why can't the peace last more than 3 days, right? And so that's why this book is just growing on me the more I think about it, is because it's just such a powerful story. And I think we can kind of
Right.
expand the scope of this if we want to, if you have anything else to say to like the Republic at large.
I want to say that when we get hit in the beginning of the story with, like, wow, this is the longest ceasefire they've ever had. How long is it? 3 days. And you're like, oh, this is a real thing. This is a real bad thing. And like that's the start. Um, it makes you, and what you were saying earlier about this failure to, this continuation of hate. What gets lost in all of that is a failure of imagination. A loss of imagination of something different. When these thoughts spin, there's no room for anything else. Uh, and that's hugely sad. Hugely sad. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I think of Padme in Revenge of the Sith. She says this war represents a failure to listen, right? That's all it boils down to,
Ah,
right?
yeah.
Just just perk your ears up and listen for one
Right.
second, right?
A lot of our conflicts could be solved that way.
I know. If only. If only. I
If
know we're speaking very
only.
generically here. We're like, why can't people
No,
just
but
listen? Like,
well, like,
like
why
it's so
can't
much
yeah.
more difficult than that. But
It
at the
is,
end of the
but
day,
it is and it's not at the same time. And of course, everything has a different context and situation, but like
right,
it is and it's not.
right, because people are stuck to their beliefs, and they want to seek out things that confirm those beliefs, and then they want to continue believing those things. after
Right.
they've confirmed it within their minds, right? And so if you're just kind of approaching things through a confirmation bias lens, like you're never going to listen, you're never going to
Right.
learn, you're never going to change. And I think it's awesome that Ziri and Fonsu were the two people who were powerful enough and had the most courage to do that,
Mhm.
despite the weight of everything that is falling on them as a prince and a princess of warring worlds. Like that is just so tough to do. Like, oh my gosh. And for both their parents being who they are, it speaks volumes. But
Right.
I thought we could briefly talk about too just the Republic at large at this time period. And this is the first book where we get to explore both chancellors, which is pretty significant that there are two chancellors during this time period, Chancellor Malo and Chancellor Greylark. So I thought that was fascinating. And there were some points in here to be made about the way that they lead and how they try to appear on a unified front, but there still is a little bit of, I wouldn't say infighting, but differing philosophies on their approach of bringing worlds into the Republic, right? Like Malo is somebody who wants to go to the Outer Rim more often and sort of diverge from maybe the more strategic mindset of Chancellor Greylark. And Malo, while he does respect her quite a bit, sees that she is somebody who was raised among the Coruscant's elite, and he was somebody who grew
Mhm.
up on the Outer Rim in war torn worlds, and he was sort of in the trenches from a young age. So he just has a different perspective on the galaxy than her, right? And she sort of sits in her tower above the clouds. So what did you think of the two chancellors, like the way that they might butt heads but also come together? And do you think it's an interesting idea to have two chancellors during this time period?
It's a hugely interesting idea, and in many ways, it makes a lot of sense. The galaxy is a very, very large place. And, if you come from Coruscant, if you come from the political elite, or if you come from one of the core worlds, you're going to have a completely different perspective, outlook, opinion, life experience, etc., 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 than somebody who comes from the Outer Rim or a planet that has really struggled or a planet that is poorer or, came from a background that is different socioeconomic status, right? All of those things. And so I think the two chancellor idea makes a lot of sense, like a lot of sense. Now, the problem is that they need to talk to each other and that they need to be on the same page and have the same goals. And it doesn't always seem like that's the case. And we don't get a ton of them specifically in this book. We're getting them through others' points of view most of the time. Um, but it's kind of clear that they don't hang out a lot and they don't know each other super duper well. And that maybe their communication is a little bit delayed, partly because of the circumstances of the galaxy at the time, partly because maybe they don't want to talk to each other super, super often because they're off doing their own thing. You know, well, Chancellor Greylark thinks that maybe the reason why Chancellor Malo hasn't reached out to her is because he wants to broker this peace deal would mean a lot to him. He wants to have an accomplishment under his belt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if he brought her under, the information umbrella, the trust tree, if you will,
We're going
that
by
things
Filoni standards.
um
Filoni's
that
trust
things
tree.
might right, that things would go a little bit differently. And so it would probably be more successful than it is, if they had a stronger method of communication throughout the galaxy. But again, it's difficult when they're in the particular time of the galaxy that they're in because communication is not instant. It is by carrier pigeon. By carrier pigeon, I do mean explorer droid things, which is
Explorer droid
essentially
things.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is essentially a carrier pigeon in this area.
Star Wars carrier pigeons. Who would have thought we'd make it here? I love that.
You know, we have to go back and what did the old Republic, did they have instantaneous communication? Is this the
Gosh, I
first
don't
time they've ever
know.
got? I don't know. I haven't. We maybe need to explore the old Republic,
We
but
got to go. Yeah, we got to go farther back at some point. Lucasfilm after High Republic. Let's do the Old Republic. Let's do it. I'm
gotta
excited. I'm
get
in.
back to the old Republic. Bum bum. Gotta
We got to
get
go back,
back
Kate.
to
We got to go
the
back.
books.
It's
If
a Lost
anybody knows that,
reference.
if anybody knows the song I'm singing, let me know. Except Old Republic is not the thing that obviously good. Anyway, if you get that
Anyway.
reference, let me know. I'm not joking. Please tweet me
Anyway.
at SUH221. 2011, 2009. What a time. Anyway.
But besides the point, What I'm interested to know is where does that breakdown happen permanently? Because we know there is one chancellor in the High Republic era, phase 1. Is the Battle of Jeddah like the incident that's like, we need new
Who's gonna
leadership?
die?
Is there going to be a
Malo's
vote of
dead.
no maybe, but is there going to be a vote of
Maybe.
no confidence? Like, are we going to see that
Ooh.
happen? Like with Chancellor Valorum? Like, are they
Oh.
going to be like
Ooh.
one senator or one chancellor now?
Brad.
This is it.
Brad.
We're done.
Brad.
What's that?
Brad. You know
What?
where they're headed for this peace treaty?
Jeddah.
That's
Jeddah.
right. Jeddah
What if
City, perhaps.
What if the statue that's fallen over on Jeddah falls on Chancellor Malo?
That'd be funny when you go and
Boom.
watch Rogue One. Chancellor Malo's under there. They couldn't get him out.
I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm singling out Chancellor Malo, but I just don't want.
The point being is you think everything's gonna go to shit at some point for the two chancellor system here, and you're thinking it's happening soon, and you're probably not wrong.
I feel like Chancellor Malo though has to be the one to die because he's the one who's out and about.
Right.
I think of the TikTok sound too. That's like, oh shucks, I really liked Melody. I really liked her. I think of like Chancellor Greylark in her tower being like, oh shucks, I really liked Malo.
You know, Malo's probably like,
hey, I'm the single one now, so I guess it's not too bad.
The other old reaction meme sound that was like, oh, why'd you have to do this? Like the one guy punches his roommate and he's like, oh, why have you done this? Like he's probably gonna get to Jeddah. He's gonna get to Jeddah and like the Path of the Open Hand is gonna show up and he's gonna be like, oh, why'd you have to do this?
I can't believe you've done this.
Thank you. Yes. I was like, I know I'm close, but I'm not there. Oh, I can't believe you've done this. Yeah. And then you can really throw in some old reaction. Charlie. Thank you. That's it. No more.
Statue falls on Quarren. Mother, that really hurt.
We're so off the rails.
That crushed me. Anyways,
but really, I think this story is so. No, okay. I'm getting back on the train. Okay. I'm getting back on the train. I'm conducting the
dialogue.
Train. Choo. Okay. And I think you're totally right about this. One, you've been right about most of the things in the High Republic so far. Two, this plot is so focused. Like the story feels so focused that it's clear to me. I don't want to say the High Republic is predictable because like I think we have a bad connotation with the word predictable in media. But like when we opened up Light of the Jedi, we knew that we were on the Titanic and the Titanic was going to sink. It was just a matter of when. We are in the same position here with Vengeance and Cataclysm and all these battle, right? Like these are bad things. And we know we're on the road to nowhere right now. It's just when are we going to get to nowhere?
When are we going to get to Planet X?
Planet X. Yeah.
At the edge of space.
At the edge of space. So we know everything's going to hit the fan. And we probably know where it's going to hit the fan. And we probably know some of the reasons why it's going to hit the fan because it sets up, some poison. Some poison in this book. And I don't think it's gone.
Yeah, time will tell though. I think Zoraida set up some really interesting dynamics here with the two chancellors because that was like one of my first questions in phase 2 was like, how does that work? And
right.
I guess the point is it works, but it doesn't. And I just wonder how that power shift is going to happen. So
that and can I also just say that like we in terms of writing and books and authors, we have not seen anything from Lydia King Star Wars yet. I don't think she did any short fiction. I could be wrong about that. I apologize if I am.
She wrote Right Hand Man for Fakpov. Empire Strikes Back.
Okay, my bad. My apologies. Yeah. That's a good one. But very like we haven't seen like her full length fiction yet, so I will amend my statement.
Correct.
And not retract it fully.
Yes.
So I believe she typically writes more books for young people. I could be wrong on this. I don't think I am, but I'm not pulling up Google, so who knows. So I'm like really interested to see her take and how she plays off of what Zoraida has set up and what the Luminous 5 have also set up with, the High Republic in general, and like her kind of point of view, if you will, on a Star Wars adult High Republic novel with all of its complexities in this universe. So I just don't feel like I know her writing voice quite yet in Star Wars. So I'm really excited to find that out with Cataclysm as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I just want all the books now. I
Right,
want to
and
read them all.
it's like, you know, when I'm not reading them, I'm like, "Oh," you know, like, "Wow, phew, that was a busy time reading all those Star Wars books. That's a lot of work," you know, and we love to do
Right.
it. We love doing this, but, like, sometimes it can be just a lot. These books are kinda dense, and we talk about them for a long time. Um, but then when I'm reading them, I'm like, "Food, delicious, yummy food, comfort food that I must eat all the time, the love of my life, this food." That's what I'm feeling right now. It's like, you know, because we're a bit behind, and you know, it's been a while since we've done the last High Republic conversation, and I'm like, oh, you know, there are other things going on in my life, and then like we start talking about the High Republic again, and I was like, this is my entire life for light
And we haven't
life.
even jumped into the comics yet either, which are like
We
apparently
haven't,
total
yeah, we're
bangers. So I can't wait.
right,
Yeah. I know. I
but
know.
like, and
That's on my list.
this is only wave one of phase two. Like we're not even at like the, you know, we're still like clinking up to the top of the roller coaster. You know, we haven't even gotten the first drop yet, which I think is going to be
I
the
think
Battle
I'm
of Jeddah.
good. I think I'm good without the drop right the second. I'm gonna enjoy the nice scenic ride up the roller coaster.
Right. You know what? You're right. Because we did read Path of Deceit, and Path of Deceit High Republic really hard. And like this book did not High Republic really hard in the way that we expect, but like, oh, Path of Deceit did. So you know what? Do I want the drop? Because Battle of Jeddah is probably going to High Republic really hard, and that means everybody dies. Pain.
Pain. Oh man. Well, that being said, I think we've talked quite a bit about the larger scope politics, the warring worlds, the forever war, dual chancellorship. I think we can jump into some characters now as part of our next bit here.
Speaking of pain, our characters have trauma.
Yeah, it's true. Trauma. The High Republic. I have
A
trauma.
commercial.
Yeah.
I have trauma from reading the High Republic.
Long ago in the High Republic, trauma.
That was really good.
I know.
You should voice
They
over
should
for
make
the High
that one of
Republic show.
the adverts on the High Republic videos.
Right. Okay. So we have talked a little bit already about Ziri and Fantu. What more should we say about them here? They're probably our primary romance in this book.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll be fully transparent. I was going into this book being like, okay, Axel and Gella are like
Yeah.
going to be my OTP for this book, like for sure, right? And then as I'm reading, I'm like, oh shit, I really love Ziri and Fantu. And I was like, the fact that they both meet and she is literally holding a dagger to his throat, which is like the most enemies to lovers that you can possibly get. So I was like, this is it. This is the stuff. This is the good stuff that I love. And watching that develop throughout the book was so much fun because Ziri is somebody who is like, I could really see this as somebody who I will love. And I think he is really head over heels more so than she is initially, right? Like I think she takes a little bit more to grow onto him than for him to grow onto her than she grew onto him, sort of. And that was an interesting and fun dynamic. And you made the point earlier about how she does, like, you're like, you know, maybe she loses a little bit of her independence, but I think this is a good example of like where it doesn't feel like the marriage is coerced or forced or against their wills. It is really like, no, they met and there was a spark and they continued exploring that spark. And the solution didn't have to be the solution if they didn't want it to be, right? Because if it's a solution that they think is going to fail, they just end up in the same place where they're warring and the ceasefire is over and there's no peace. So that wouldn't do anybody any good. So I loved that these were really two people who deeply loved each other. And my favorite part was like during the wedding scene and they are doing their vows and the bounty hunters and the mercenaries are coming in and all hell is breaking loose. And they're like, okay, let's rush through it. You know, my blood is the ocean. My bones are the salt, but I give you my heart until Eiram's last breath. And then he says, I am so madly in love with you. And she says, good. and then they start fighting, and I'm like, oh my god, that's so good. I'm like, this is such a brilliant book. I love this so freaking much. Like, we're getting a wedding in Star Wars, and then they're kicking ass like 5 minutes later. That's just so fun.
It's also just like such a great admission of love too, because he kind of is thinking throughout the story, like, are we at the hugging phase yet? Like, can I go up to her and ask her if it's okay? But yeah, you're right. He's clearly kind of fallen for her a bit faster. He's like, wow, I can't believe she's suggested this. I get we're gonna go for it, and he's kind of like, wait, she's kind of awesome. But he kind of trusts her right away, which I think is great. And yeah, who doesn't love like it's what it is? You know what it is? You know what it is?
What's that?
You know what it
What's
is? It's
that?
Pirates of the Caribbean, kiss on the deck kind of a vibe. It's
Oh
like the
yeah.
middle. And we love that. We live for that stuff. One of the most iconic movie kisses, okay? It's iconic. Elizabeth Swann, all right? Keira Knightley, I love you. But like that we are both badasses. We are in the middle of this where we are doing our best to like live and love and move forward despite this battle. And we're gonna battle and live to see another day. Huzzah! And that was such an exciting moment.
And also when they're at the outpost on their journey across Eiram-E'ronoh. I think it's on Eiram-E'ronoh. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's on Eiram-E'ronoh.
Gosh, can I just say that the planet names being both starting with E's is backfiring for my brain?
It really is for me. And that's no offense to anybody. That's just reading comprehension
like,
for me.
What am I supposed to how am I supposed to figure this out for myself? Anyway.
But there's this one point where they're at the outpost and Ziri has to fight Bruzo because Bruzo challenges her right and honor and life and the throne, right? And Ziri accepts this fight, and they do the thing, which is again very Dune like at the end of Dune when Timothy Chalamet's character, I think, Tom Atreides or Paul Atreides, whatever.
Paul.
Sure. Yeah, that one. When he does his
that
duel.
Guy.
Yeah, that dude. The Chalamet guy. But Ziri fights and she wins, and then Bruzo, who is behind her, still charges at her despite her winning this battle. And Fonzu just punches him in the face.
Yeah.
Just knocks him out. And then Fonzu's like, she will fight with us together and you're going to all deal with it. So back up. And then he takes her hand and they walk off. I was like, oh yeah, that's the kind of good tension building angst between two lovers. That's like, they are not necessarily reluctant, but maybe skeptical, but still feeling something. And then how that grows over time to be like, we're partners in this together. Like, so I thought that was a great moment.
I don't know if I have anything more to add about this specific point, but I do agree wholeheartedly.
But yeah, I don't think I have much else to add as well, Sarah. Again, just really impressed with how much love was important to the story. And I really hope we get more of these two characters in like future books. Like, will we see them in Cataclysm? Like, will they make a return? I don't know. I could get a whole comic with these two. Like, and that's sort of the bummer of this phase is like, we're gonna leave these characters behind, whoever's left.
Right. So
and
soon.
I'm somewhat sad about that. I just hope they're explored more as in some form or fashion. So
I agree. The more the merrier for this period of time in Star Wars, for sure. Well, I guess that brings us to more trauma, more pain, and more mess, and more romance, kind of. With
sorta.
With
will they, won't they?
Will they, will not they? Gella Nattai and Axel Greylark. Axel Greylark. Fuckboy. Mess.
Rake.
Let's talk about Rake for a second, because Rake is somebody from Utapau who is on Coruscant and who owns like a little seedy area in Coruscant, who has a wall of trophies from patrons, including Axel's hair. Rake's Club, where we first meet Axel. Can we just talk about how this is funny? Because Axel is a romance Rake. I was going to save this for odds and ends, but
I didn't realize you were making that connection, that it's Rake's parlor. Oh my God.
Yeah, okay, and that's where we meet him.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Now I understand the spelling thing. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that makes sense now because they're spelled differently, but yes. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I first heard about the term when I watched Bridgerton because I think one of the episodes was called Capital R Rake, and I was like, "What does that mean?" But a
Such a good
rake,
episode title.
according to Urban Dictionary, is a man who is skilled at manipulating women, and especially at seducing women by pretending to care about them. When in reality, they are only interested in sexual desire. Basically, that's at least one definition of it. But it's essentially somebody who is like pretty manipulative, and he's just out for himself and his own pleasures, and he's a total tool. And
But
Axel Greylark, I
also,
think, fits the definition a little bit.
romance rakes are also pretty sexy shirtless and will worm their way into your heart. And that's why I think I can fix Axel. In this essay, I will.
We're gonna have to have like a I can fix Axel jar where every time you think you can fix Axel, you put a penny in the jar.
No, I can fix him. I really can.
By the end of this podcast, we might be able to take a fun little trip to Star Tours very soon.
We might be able to fund my trip out to Celebration London, which is not happening. But maybe if I just say I can fix him enough times.
Oh my gosh!
But yeah, no,
Axel Greylark, what a guy! What a guy!
What a guy! What a guy! And what a guy that I did want to murder halfway through, or 70% of this way through the book. Because as we know, I do not like the mother. She gives me the heebie-jeebies. She sucks. She's the worst. She's terrifying, and she's bad. There's my tangent on the mother. She's bad, actually.
I mean, she is a cult leader, so yes, definitely bad.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we knew this.
The vibes are not good. Yeah,
the vibes are really bad. She kind of hatched a nameless and then had to murder everybody. Anyway,
totally not cool, mother.
Totally not cool. So let's talk about this situationship.
Yeah, or actually, can we talk about each of the characters individually first before we get into the situationship? Because the situationship sort of resolves.
Is dictated by,
is sort of the resolution of this. Yeah, Axel Greylark. Let's kick it off with him because you mentioned trauma. Can you walk us through like what trauma he's dealing with, and we can sort of dive into that and what we found interesting about his story?
His droid, Quinn, is literally a therapy droid, which I love. More therapy droids in the galaxy, please. But Quinn is really in tune to his emotions and will, be there whenever he needs something. And
he turns certain colors, I believe, as well.
Yeah, it turns certain colors, and it also kind of will alert him to like where he should be going in this way. Like it'll give him the purple for Gella, and he's like, "Oh, come on." But Axel tells the story, and his situation is that he and his father were on this mission to negotiate the release of a leader, but ultimately was a trap. And this trap left Axel's father kind of underneath some rubble. And Axel tried his best to rescue his dad, but he was pulled away by the Jedi, who said that it was the will of the Force. And she just walked away and discussed a cargo manifest like nothing had happened, like they hadn't made me leave my father behind to die. And he met her years later and says, she didn't even remember me. Why would she? What is one grieving boy in a galaxy full of them? And so he has been dealing with the fact that he abandoned his father. I mean, that's kind of his framing of it. He abandoned his father to die and, has this crushing guilt that he lives with. And scars from this trap and his injuries and all that stuff, and that's clearly affected him really greatly, and I think it would affect everyone really greatly. Terrible thing. You kind of as that is peeled back for Axel, you're like, oh, I get it, that's capital T trauma, but he kind of dealt with that in really unhealthy ways. By smuggling and going to the path and gambling and probably getting with everybody, including droids under the sun, because he flirts also with droids. Don't we all? But yeah, so he coped with that in
Sarah's
unhealthy
like, I should
ways.
text him, and him being C-3PO.
Don't call me out like that on the pod. I love C-3PO.
Just got him on speed dial.
Got him on speed
2
dial
a.m.
number
booty
1.
call.
Speed dial number 1, actually. Um,
C-3PO, you want to show me one of those 6 million forms of communication that you have stored in your databanks?
oh my lord, that was really good. That was a good one.
We're
Oh,
keeping that one
snaps for
in.
you. Yeah,
Yeah,
keep that
no.
one in for sure. You can joke on me at the pod because that joke was really good. Anyway. The
As we're
bad
talking
jokes you have
about
to cut out.
trauma. Yeah, let's go back to the trauma.
This episode is not as we're really not serious anymore about this stuff. People are going to start turning this stuff off. They're going to be like, gosh, they really have lost it.
They've really lost the touch.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Somewhat
Anyway,
like Axel Greylark, who is now gambling
wow.
and getting into all sorts of trouble.
Wow, that was so good. It was
But there's this
excellent,
quote
excellent.
here about Axel, and he's in Rake's parlor. It says, "quote This was a place where he could have fun, forget, buried so deep in the underbelly of Coruscant, in a place that smelled like acrid sewers and musty recycled air. A place
Ew.
of shadows where he didn't have to be Axel Greylark, son of the most important woman in the galaxy. He could just be his wretched self." And so, yeah, like
So
you said, he's coping in some of the worst ways possible. He's putting up the walls. He has a scar over his heart, which is super symbolic, right? Like figuratively and literally, he has a scar on his heart
mhm,
that
mhm.
he's sort of in times where he feels like he's forgetting his father's face, or that he can't breathe. He presses on his scar to remember, remember the pain of his dad, and like remember like why he's still here, and like what he's still kind of fighting. I guess like not like fighting for, but like what he's suppressing. Like don't lose the face of your father, sort of. And he just keeps running from that. Like he goes on all sorts of escapades, and he ends up on Dalna when he takes a job for Nay Madine, and that's how he meets the mother and comes into cahoots with the Path of the Open Hand. And the mother is somebody that he comes across and feels like for the first time was somebody that was truly seeing him for who he was and his potential. Um, and that's sort of how he gets roped into the path, not because he shares their beliefs, but because he is feeling seen, by somebody named the mother, because his own mother was never there or never really gave him the
Ooh,
emotional support that he needed, because she is
yeah,
busy cozying up to elites and doing her job as a chancellor. And you really have time to babysit your kid all the time, who's like a grown adult and getting into trouble and being bailed out for the 15th time in a row. Like, how do you
right.
deal with that?
And it's clear he's doing all of these things to forget. Like, how,
Yeah, yeah.
what can I do every day that will not allow me to think? And he talks about how he doesn't sleep well. It's like, well, that makes a lot of sense because sleeping means being alone with your thoughts, right? So yeah, he's just somebody that I think is just trying to suppress and is kind of his emotions and kind of taking it out in any way that he can, or finding comfort in any way that he can. And it doesn't help that the people in his life, specifically his mother, don't have the emotional space to work through it with him.
The nightmares are plaguing him, and he's remembering all the things that he doesn't want to remember. And when he gets poisoned by the scorpion at the end of the book, while he's unconscious, he sees all these terrible dreams that sort of leave him feeling like he's being ripped from the insides. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that sort of sets him off. It kind of chain reacts to make him a little illogical and irrational and acting kind of out of the ordinary and unlike himself, very impulsive, to the point where he will carry out a terrorist act to destroy the poison so it never harms anybody else in the process, while at the same time feeling like, what else do I have to live for? I've lost my dad. I don't really have a relationship with my mom. So Axel Greylark, as much of a fuckboy as he is a tragic character, and I really sympathize with him quite a bit.
Yeah, and ultimately, his actions were really bad in the end of this book. He makes the wrong decisions on what to do to when he changes his plans. But I think it feels like a plea. It feels like a cry for help. It feels like he's walked up to the edge of the cliff and has decided he wants to jump. It feels like he wants a new start. And by calling on the bounty hunters, by just causing destruction, by faking his own death or actually dying, he can have a new start or an ending. And it's sad. It's sad that he, instead of, actually fixing himself, or working towards a more peaceful heart and a more peaceful mind, he instead kind of goes off the deep end a little bit, and takes this route instead. And I think that the conversation that he and Gella have is at the tower at the end of the book is really sad, because Gella's like, I've seen all the recordings, I've heard everything, I know your story, I know who you are. This doesn't have to happen like this. And that's kind of painful, because, like, I think she sees a potential in him. She sees a glimmer of a better person than the one that's standing right in front of her, and he doesn't.
Mm-hmm. That's I think that's why it is such a sad, like, note for the story. And there was one quote here where it says from Axel, he thinks, I think you're only allowed to be broken for I actually think he says this, I think you're only
Yeah.
allowed to be broken for so long before even the people you love start to wish you'd get over it. At least that's what it's like
Mm-hmm.
being the chancellor's son. Axel loving his mom, how long has his mom just been saying, get over your father's death? Like, it was a while ago, it's in the past. Like, you need to move on and, like, brush yourself up. You were a senator in a senator apprenticeship, like, you had everything going for you, like, why are you throwing it all away? uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that he's just really lost himself. He's just lost himself completely. And it's not until he meets Gella, which we'll get into shortly, but Gella is, I think, somebody who lightens the load and the weight that's been on his heart for so long, and lightens the feeling of that scar that's across his chest. And he finally feels like he's finding some sort of North Star that can guide him in the right direction. I don't think Gella will have all the answers for him, but it will maybe steer him back on the right path, because Gella is maybe that first person who hasn't told him to get over it, right? Everybody around him is saying get over it, but she's the first one that's like, no, because she has to ask him a couple times for him to open up about it and to actually give the
Mm-hmm.
truth, right? Like, there's, like, I think there's like
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 times, and it's the third that he actually tells her. Um, and to your quote that you said earlier, like, what is one grieving boy in a galaxy full of them? And Gella puts her hand on his and she says everything.
Right.
Like, I mean, that's romance aside. I mean, that's just caring for somebody that, you know, despite Gella's impressions of Axel, like, she wants to be there for him. Like, she sees that he is pained by this.
Right. And he has that glimmer in him, and Gella sees that when he saves her, or he rescues her, or he doesn't forget about her, doesn't leave her behind, when he makes her the champion in order to get the favor from the owner of that club, right? um and she's like, why did he save me? Why did he come back? Why? And that's what she asks him, like, up on the tower, I believe. And she's like, I have to know, like, why did you come back? And I think that that is a really interesting thing too, because she's kind of realizing, oh, he cares about me. There's something in him that cares of who I am and what, my well-being. And I think that's the connection point, is like, he's somebody who cared so much about his father, and then that was broken into 1,000 pieces, and then he said, F it, I'm not caring anymore. Someone came in and is like, hey, and he's like, oh no, I care, but I'm so uncaring. Like, I can't not be who I am, and the person that I am is uncaring. But deep down inside, his heart is like, I care, I care, I care, I care. And so, about myself and about her and all of this stuff. So I think that it's so subtly told. This story between them, their relationship, as it changes and grows over the course of the story, is so subtly and gently told. And I like that. And also, Axel has Gella's lightsabers on the cover of Cataclysm. Ah!
Oh my gosh, I need to know everything. Like, what is that
Seriously.
all about? What is that all about? Can we talk about some of Axel Greylark's like funnier moments? Because while he is also a tragic character, he's also fucking hilarious, and I love him.
Wait, what moments do you have pulled?
I have a couple here. I have a couple. I mean, the first one that made me laugh out loud, like audibly laugh out loud, was when the murder happens and like everybody's trying to figure it out, and he arrives on the planet finally. He walks in. He goes, "Pardon me, did someone say killer? Another one of your themed parties, friends?" And the chancellor is like,
Oh,
"Axel, no, that's not what's
like,
happening."
Axel, shut the fuck up and sit down, my friend. I have some catching up to do. Jesus Christ.
Oh my gosh. And then, when they're selecting who to be the guards for their mission across Eiram-E'ronoh, Bantu says, "What sort of training goes into being the galaxy's most eligible bachelor?" And he says, "Ah, you've read up on me."
Ah, okay, you're right. These are funnies. You know what? Yeah, they are. I'm
Oh my
sorry.
God. He also tells Font2, "I find those I meet want to either kill me, bed me, or save me from my worst impulses." And
Okay, I want to fix him, okay?
he makes a point to say worrying makes you get old fast. And then Font2 says, "Let me guess, you want to be young forever?" And he says, "No, not exactly. I want to burn quickly in a blaze of glory like a supernova." I'm just like, Jesus Christ, this guy is just pure chaos. Pure
Wow.
chaos. He's the king of chaos.
Not to completely derail, but that's like the opposite of RM of BTS and his entire theory of his album Indigo, his title track Wildflower. He wants to be like a wildflower as opposed to a firework. Great song, really highly recommend it.
Oh man.
But that's so interesting, yeah, because he reminds me a little bit of Chasna Chaddock in that way. Chasna Chaddock's like,
Yeah,
I would like to be a martyr.
that was the thought I had. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I wonder if that is a little bit of foreshadowing for Cataclysm. Like, will he go out as a supernova? Like
No.
what is his end goal? So I hope not.
Let him live.
Yeah, please let him and Gella be one of the lost 20 and they go get married somewhere. Anyways,
I support it.
I digress. And lastly here, there's a conversation with him and Gella, and he says Gella has 3 serious faces. He says the "oh no, Axel, how could you possibly talk without thinking" face. Then there's your Jedi fighting face. And finally, the one you've had this entire trip, the burden of the galaxy face. And so I love the way that he is sort of reading her and trying to understand her. And it sort of rubs at her the wrong way because she's like, "You
It
don't understand me,
does.
dude."
Well,
And
she's
you're
also
kind of
like,
getting on my nerves.
she's also like, oh no, he's noticing. He's noticing that I'm thinking about him in the Force, and he's looking at me back. Oh no,
Right. Gosh, what a mess though. But I honestly think like he is one of the funniest characters that I'm just completely over the moon and drawn to, and like the concept art of him is just so good. And him on
He's
that
handsome.
cover. Oh man.
It's kind of hot.
That's gonna be a nice book. Yeah. Nice book cover.
The other thing I want to mention about his funnies is how he like throws himself into chairs. This happens like 3 or 4 times throughout this book. It just like he threw himself down. Like, why does he need to like throw himself into a chair? He can't just sit like a normal person. He has to like plop.
And he's probably man spreading too. Like he's like,
oh, he's
opening up.
Definitely.
He's like, look,
man spreading.
Look at me.
When Gella like walks in and he's like shirt half unbuttoned, can see the scar on his chest, or like totally shirtless and can see the scar on his chest. I just completely imagine him like leaning back in the chair, like butt at the end of the chair, like man spreading, lounging.
Yeah, I mean, he's like the definition of a player. That's him in a nutshell. And I will clarify, he is the Prince of Chaos according to Zoraida. Elzar Mann still is the King of Chaos. So
yeah, I mean, we have to make the distinction clear. We did find Elzar Mann in a compromising position as a battle was beginning. Choices were made, and
pants
they were not
off.
ones.
He was going full commando while
I love him.
Valo was getting attacked by the Nile.
I love him. That was such a choice.
He's like, well, where are my undies? It's just interesting how you and I are drawn to like the 2 most chaotic individuals of each of these phases.
We're also Raylos.
Yeah, in case you
this is not news, that we're drawn to these messy chaos boys of chaos and mess.
Right.
Because do you think that you can fix them? Because like I do.
I mean, I don't. I think I probably can't fix. Uh, I can't fix him, but I could
I can
try.
fix
I
Elzar.
could
I can
try.
fix Elzar for sure. I don't think Elzar needs
Elzar's
that much
pretty.
fixing.
No, he just needs a couple tweaks here and there.
He just needs to leave the Jedi
Specifically,
Order.
specifically pants. He needs
A better
clothes.
belt.
Yeah, he needs like a one of those
Suspenders.
those Apple things that you put on your keychain. So when you lose your phone, you just like ding it, or
Oh,
you lose your
yeah, yeah,
keys and
yeah.
you ding it on your phone. But
Like,
he needs
"Oh,
to put one of
there's my
those in his
pants."
pockets. Just put it in a
Mm.
pocket, sew it into the fabric so it never gets out.
Right.
Um,
Anyway,
anyways, we're
we're
talking
drawn
about
to
Elzar.
problematic, chaotic men here on this podcast. It is our downfall. We also love Cyril Karn. It is he's so pathetic. We love him. Uh,
Oh
you know,
boy.
it's just who we are. You know, they're fictional. We can do anything in fiction.
Of course,
Don't come
naturally.
after
Yeah.
us.
Well, as much as we've talked about Axel, let's talk about Gella before we sort of look at the two of them together and where they end up at the conclusion of the story. So Gella is a Jedi Knight, and as we said, she failed her first mission, and now she's sort of thrown into this one to learn to be a part of a team. But she is somebody who knows curiosity is what drives her. It's her strength. It's her Jedi path, and it's what keeps her questioning so much of her Jedi path throughout the book. And like how will she answer back to the Force? Like she's considered being a way seeker at one point. Um, she knows Jedi Melly Day was one, and that's kind of somebody that she's maybe looked up to or been inspired by to sort of go off and find answers that maybe don't fall within the exact edicts of the Jedi Order's code. But she wants to also be like the perfect Jedi, which is not totally unlike some people like Vernestra, who is somebody who wants to be the best of the best. And like,
Mm.
where will that lead Vernestra? But we know for Gella, it eventually leads her to be a way seeker at the end of this book, and she is going to go to the Jedi Council and ask to be one, so she can go on her own journey. But what did you think of Gella and sort of her finding her place not only within the order but within the galaxy, and this idea also that keeps springing up of home, and like what is her home and what is her family, and what is her guiding light to keep her moving forward?
Yeah, it's so interesting because you asked me before we started recording, and you said, "Sarah, did you think she was going to be a way seeker?" And I said, "No." And I didn't. But her question of what is home, this conversation about home for her gets brought up so much. She's like, "Well, I don't have parents. I don't have a place. My place is the galaxy. I'm a Jedi. The Jedi is so crucial to who I am." And she says at one point, when Axel asks her, like, if I were not the son of the Chancellor and you were not a Jedi, like, could we be friends? And she's like, "Well, I wouldn't be myself without myself as a Jedi." And like, she doesn't know any other way, but it perplexes her. And I think it goes back to, what we were talking about at towards the beginning of this when it comes to um questioning something you've always known, like why doing the why of it all, and like somebody not being able to give you a really good answer. I think it ultimately makes sense that she does become a way seeker, and that she has this journey um of what her home is or what it could be or what her place in the world is. And I like how understated it is, you know?
Yeah, and it's fascinating to watch her like rebound from failure. And we
Right.
know from Yoda, like failure is the greatest teacher. Or I should say the greatest teacher failure is, because he speaks
Yeah,
backwards.
get it right,
Uh,
Brad.
I'm a
We're a
fake
serious
fan.
podcast. We're not messing up major quotes here. Only minor quotes.
But actually, when she's talking with Ziri, which by the way, I love their friendship.
Yeah.
I love them two together, and how they
Women,
develop that. Women,
friends in the Star Wars, there are actually enough of them to be friends with each other?
so good.
Whoa.
But those two is actually like where the conversation of home happens, and the
Mm,
ideas of like fear, and like they're having this discussion about fear and not being good enough, and Ziri is worried, like, can I be the leader my people need to unite these planets? And Gela tells her the story about how the younglings, they learn with those laser modules, like the remote trainers that, and then she tells a story about like her and Yoda at the frog pond, and how there's a frog that keeps jumping to a lily pad and doesn't make it and gets back up and tries to jump again, and Yoda tells her like, you need to be the frog. And I thought that was really good because it was like kind of just like, to Gela's point to Ziri, it's like, yeah, a lot of what we do is confront fear, feel it, and conquer it, but we have to accept that it is a part of us like anything else. And I think that acceptance is so important on anybody's journey, that like fear is going to be part of the journey and like failure is going to be part of the journey. It is not like the journey's over if you experience those things. Like it is an ongoing obstacle that you have to confront. And to Luke's point to Rey and the Rise of Skywalker, like the conquering fear is the ultimate destiny of the Jedi.
Mm.
Like that's
Mhm.
what is like the driving motivator, is to like conquer your fear and overcome it.
Yeah, and that was an idea that, like, I really struggled with in the Rise of Skywalker. I was like, is that the conquering thing of the Jedi? And it made a lot more sense to me in this story. That idea of, like, we talk I mean, fear is obviously, like, a key motivator in the High Republic. For the first time, uh, who was it? Stellan Geos felt fear. For the first time, so and so felt fear. Oh, lordy. Bad, bad, bad. I never thought of the Jedi's path, their goal of peace and justice in the galaxy as that of overcoming fear. But I guess that's the personal side of it. Like, what does it mean to follow the Force? What does it mean to trust in the Force, overcoming any fear or doubt um, of that? And yeah, I think that's a really kind of interesting. I think how it's placed in this story is really interesting,
Well, and
valuable.
Ziri asks too, like, what if you can't conquer it? And we all know fear is the path to the dark side, right? So it does make sense when you
Well,
think about it, right? Like fear leads to anger. If you can't conquer that first step, like kind of spiral,
right.
which is Anakin's journey, right? He can't confront fear. He kind of runs away from it and tries to prevent it from happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love where Gela ends in her journey for this book, at least. It says Gella Nattai was on her way. She heard the call of the forest. She had heard her entire life, but now it was sharper. It was the song of stars charting routes to new worlds. It was the sigh of an ancient mountain. It was the churn of a sea change as she sat in the cockpit of the Eventide, which I love that she got Axel's ship.
Oh, yeah.
As she
I
sat
was
in the
like,
cockpit of the Eventide, she familiarized herself with every part of it before leaving the docking bay. The Nava computer was programmed with hundreds of coordinates, and she flew across real space for hours before charting a destination. It was the galaxy calling her home. And I
mm,
just love the like final line there. Like it feels very freeing. It feels like as we start to talk about these two characters, Axel and Gela together, um, what she is yearning for, and it's not home, because she knows like the home is her galaxy. So really what she is yearning for is to explore her home now that she's understood what it is. And that leads me to like one conversation that they have, which is like, I think when they're possibly fighting, or um Axel's talking to her and she's like, I'm driven by curiosity, and but like you can do anything. You can go anywhere. I almost envy that, the possibilities, right? And so here
mm,
she is at the end of this book realizing she can go anywhere. She doesn't have to envy Axel's journey. Axel being the son of the chancellor, he kind of has all of everything at his disposal, but he's running away from his home and his family, whereas she doesn't have family or a home. And then at the end of the book, like coming to terms with the fact that like, no, my home is the galaxy. I am confident in that belief, and I have every possibility ahead of me. I can go anywhere I want. And the irony of flying an Axel Greylark ship, that like, I'm using his ship and I get to go wherever I want next in my journey. So I thought that was really fulfilling for her character.
I agree. And I think this idea of like her coming to terms with the galaxy as her home and not coming to terms with it, but accepting it and getting to explore is something that's um exciting for the future of her character. I don't know how she'll return in Cataclysm. We know that she has to, you know, Axel has her lightsaber. Something happens. Something happens. So she'll be around, but getting to explore other paths of the Force in order to find herself is something that I think is like a really exciting idea for her as a character. Um, and I'm looking forward to where her adventures may take her because I'm very curious to see more activities from the Wayseekers. R.I.P. Orla Jareni.
Orla, oh gosh. Why'd you have to remind me?
I'm sad about it. That's why. I just have to bring everybody else into my sadness. You know, we've talked about both of these characters individually. I think we should just take a moment to like focus in and talk about them as a pairing. Because it was different than what I think we both expected from these characters in this book. And we've talked about some of these things, you know, her or him opening up to her about his father. That was a huge exercise in trust for him and opening up. We've talked a little bit about, you know, their conversation and their antics or bad stuff, Axel on the tower, where she's like, you know, why did you come back for me? And them kind of having this moment, and then nothingness where he ends up getting arrested. We talked a little bit about shirtless Axel and his scar over his heart. We haven't mentioned the hair braiding. The hair braiding. Ladies, gentlemen, folks in general, a man
We have the evidence.
who can braid hair. He may be a mess, but he's husband material.
If that doesn't spell love, I don't know what is. He's braiding her Jedi
Like, really?
hair.
I mean, like, what an intimate thing, though. What an intimate thing, though. You know, they've just met, and he's like, "I'll braid your hair. I got you, bestie." And then he opens up, and he's like, "Yeah, these are the only times I ever spent with my mom. Was like as a child." I'm like, oh, yeah. Anyway, hair braiding, hair braiding. So that I think that was a fun thing. Also, he's somebody who calls her like, oh, Jedi Knight, and is kind of like a derogatory thing. So of course he's kind of got some trauma with the Jedi, as we have previously talked about. But then he's at the end like, my Jedi Knight.
Sarah, calm yourself, or you're gonna end up right in jail next to Axel Greylark.
It's so exciting. It's so exciting. I don't know. He doesn't sound bad. It's exciting. I don't know.
He's such a fuck boy. He has a trance over us. He has us in a trance. Like
he has us in a trance, but he's maybe a little bit of a
eyes
romantic
glossed over.
okay? He's just somebody who has built some walls around his heart, and they're really big fortified fortress walls, okay? And he's built those walls for good reason. He makes some bad choices here at the end of this book, but I think he wants his walls to be torn down a little bit. I think he wants to let other people in, okay? Secret. Okay. Yeah. Anyway.
Besides
Sarah,
the hair braiding,
get off the podcast, get your life together, and then come back. Is what I feel like you're saying to me.
I'm here for it. Like, I don't know. I haven't really been like part of the discourse or like the online discussion around these two characters and like who is shipping them and who is not shipping them. Like, I am very much in the pro ship for these two. Like, there is something there clearly. Like, it's very obvious.
Yeah. And we've been talking about
where it ends up going. Who knows?
I want that, and I want them to be corrupted by messy people.
Yeah,
that's so bad. Well, oh my god.
I wanna go to the part that you mentioned earlier where Axel, well, he introduces the conversation by going Gella, and she goes, Axel. He goes, do you think that if you weren't a Jedi and I wasn't, well, whoever I am, that perhaps you and I could be real friends? And then, you know, she says, I dedicated my life to a vow. I can't separate that person. And that's when he first says, oh, my Jedi Knight, I know. You know, the Eiram-E have another superstition that they live many lives, perhaps to the next life. And then he kisses the top of her hand. Not to put a tinfoil hat on, he talks about in another life. Is perhaps Elzar and Avar reincarnated versions of Axel and Gella?
That's chaotic.
Just saying. Another life.
Chaotic. But
Pablo, Matt Martin, tell me. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No. Hold on. He kisses her hand and then he like lingers there for a second. Okay, that's
screaming.
I don't know. I can't explain it. Am I problematic? Yeah, I understand that.
I mean, that's why we're here. We're here to be problematic. With these two. Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I don't know. There's just some, it's kind of it gives me like Emma vibes where he's like, if I loved you less, perhaps I could talk about it more, you know? The
Mm.
kiss and then
Oh,
like the linger.
totally.
But we're just not
And
gonna.
I think Axel wishes he loved her less. Like
Oh, 100%.
he's
Exactly.
like,
Exactly.
I don't want to be in love with you, but I am. I'm inextricably
Like this
drawn to
is
you and I hate it.
yeah. This is messy and I don't like that you're like unavailable, unemotionally unavailable, but I also don't like that I'm emotionally unavailable and therefore I will just kiss your hand. Moi.
The ultimate the ultimate token. Nice sound effect there. The ultimate token of gratitude and love in Star Wars. The kiss on the
A
hand.
kiss. A kiss of gratitude.
Kiss of gratitude. But I
I
want to
love
jump
it.
to the tower scene because we've alluded to it a bunch, but that really is the climax here.
Yeah, and
And
Brad probably
I
has the
think
quote. I don't.
I do. It's at the very bottom
Okay.
of our very long Google Doc here.
No, mine don't
And
very long Google Doc. Oh, there it is. I got
um,
it. Mhm.
so like really this is Axel Greylark's last stand. He has seen quite a bit under the poison, like the nightmares that came to him were something he wouldn't wish upon anybody else. So he's like, we got to get rid of this. We got to eliminate it once and for all. Like I have nothing else to live for at this point besides Gella. And like you said, she's taken. So it's like, what am I chasing at this point?
Taken by the force.
Taken by the force. Leave room for Jesus. Leave room for the
By the
force.
force.
But he tells her, I've spent part of my life trying to be the perfect Greylark and another part being the best of the worst. You can't fix me, Gella. And she goes, I don't want to fix you. And he says, you want to fix the whole galaxy, but not me. Which, like, when I read that, I was like, kind of heartbreaking. Like, why can't I be somebody you want to fix? But the whole galaxy, sure. And then she goes, I don't want to fix you. Like, so clearly she views him as somebody that's not needing to be fixed. She loves the part for the part and the whole for the whole. She loves
And
all of
each part for
Axel
the role it
Greylark.
plays. Mhm.
Right.
Great
So,
stuff. Thank you so much. I would also just want to say that I can fix him.
you're not being a Jedi.
I'm not contributing to the discussion either. You're right. It's the emphasis on fix is like you don't need the fixing. You just need care. Like you just need love and care and a, a better thought when you look in the mirror. It's not about fixing you. It's not about like righting the wrongs. It's about, when you look in the mirror, not hating that person.
Right. And to Axel's point, he's like, well, what are you going to do with the queen who we find out was manufacturing this poison in a factory and was going to kind of keep it for a last resort or to use as a weapon in case the Republic was no longer an ally or if the planet turned against them again. He's like, what's going to happen to them? Aren't they going to go to jail? And Gella says something along the lines of like, that's not what we do. Like that's not who we are. Even though he ends up going to jail, but it's not like he's completely the worst person in the world for doing this. Like what he's doing is bad, yes, but um she's not going to completely ostracize him, right? Like there's still a moment here between the two of them at the very end. And right before that, he's like, if we don't live through this, I hope my ghost haunts you for eternity, or hope my ghost haunts yours for eternity. Like he's so obsessive, it's funny. Um, and she goes, we don't believe in ghosts. And he says, leave it to me to fall for a humorless Jedi. And she thinks she didn't want to hear those words, not from him. So there's a little bit of her rejecting the idea of him falling in love and proclaiming his love for her in this moment. Do you think she's going to come around to that? Do you think it's going to these words will sit in the back of her mind? Is this something she's going to struggle with as a way seeker who is not leaving the order, but sort of separating herself from the order, which initially, like he asked the question, if you weren't a Jedi, like what would we be? And then she's
Mhm.
making the choice to go off on this like not like non-Jedi like adventure, but like a little disparate from it. Like, is she gonna sit with that, you think? Because I think she will.
Yes.
Like they have to end up back together, obviously. So like something drives them back together.
Yeah, and I think that this conversation about like fixing and scars and what's left and all of that stuff is is like, okay, how can I heal my heart? Gella, how can I heal my heart? How can I find myself in the world? What does it mean to be me? I think that'll lead her back to Axel because he is also on a journey to like maybe not that one that he wants to be on, the one that she wants to be on is to like love himself a little more. And so is she in a different way. I don't know if that makes sense. That was just what was in my head.
There's a very small moment here at the end too where he asks her to stay and she brushes his hair aside and they're just like kind of
Yeah.
chilling on top of the rubble.
That's the moment I was thinking about too, because
You
that
know?
quote right there. Perhaps Axel was right. It was impossible to regain something after it was broken. The scars would still be there. They would serve as memories so that it would never happen again. As she drew her hand away and left to get help, Gella was certain she would always prefer to have that scar. Oh, Zoraida! That's so delicious.
There is a scar, an Axel Greylark shaped scar on her heart now that she will not forget.
It's gonna
So,
bring them back together.
yeah. But first, Axel's gonna have to get out of jail because he was arrested for conspiracy, murder, and terrorism. I don't know why I said it like that. But Axel, you fucked up, man.
He really messed it up. He really goofed and hurt a lot of people, and that was bad.
Yeah, very bad.
You know, some people I say are my baby boys who have never done anything wrong in their life, and I do that mean that as a joke, but like also seriously, Axel, he's made some mistakes, capital M.
Yeah, his mom was like, "We can't get you out of this one, son. I'm sorry. Like this is a little,
she says,
a little too far."
She's like, "Oh, I don't want to." She's like, "You know, my goal is the galaxy. It's not him." And I'm like, "Oh, I mean, I get it, but like, oh,
right.
That's got to sting for him a little bit, I imagine."
Oh, totally. But he's sitting in his jail cell here at the very end.
Oh my God. Say it.
And it
Do
says, he felt her presence late when the lights were out, and all he had to himself in the memory of dancing with her on the last day, he half considered he could be a good man. He'd done everything to prove to everyone, even himself, that he wasn't. He tried to carve her out of his heart as she had done to him, but she was wedged inside like a splinter around which skin had grown. One day he'd get rid of it. Axel Greylark waited in his cell, ready to feed his chaos. Oh boy. A splinter around which skin had grown.
The fact that he felt her presence late when the lights were out and all he had was himself and the memory of dancing with her. Brad, you mentioned something to me off air, and I don't actually think you've mentioned it yet.
Oh, I haven't.
On air. And I would like you to say it, please.
Well, you said something initially that got us going with this conversation.
Okay.
So it was really kind of your idea that you planted, and I sort of added to it. So why don't you kick it off with where your thought process started? Here.
I love Jane Eyre. That's a start. And in Jane Eyre, if you haven't read it, great book. Please read it. I'm about to spoil it. It's 200 years old, but like I recommend going into it fresh. If you haven't read it, if you don't know the story, it's great. But basically, right, you know, Jane Eyre, the governess, and she goes to Mr. Rochester's mansion to be the governess of his daughter Adele, or the young girl Adele, and I think that's her name. That is her name. And they kind of have this like thing happening, but she's also seeing ghosts in the night. You know what I'm saying? Well, they're at the altar, and then you know, his Rochester's wife's brother is like, "You have my wife in the attic," and he's like, stop talking. And they're like, "What?" And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "What?" And they're like, "What?" She leaves. She means Sinjin. Sinjin sucks. And then through the universe, she hears her name called by him, by Rochester. And she's like, "I have to go back. I have to go back." She goes back. And you know what, reader, listener, you know what she does? She says, "Reader, I married him. Reader, I married him." They had something in the universe that they were linked. These guys. Okay. Anyway, continue. Go ahead. Thank you. Read Jane Eyre. It's a good book. They've got like a force bond going on. And when she's trying to find him, she keeps hearing her name like uttered by him through the force in her mind. She's like, "Huh. I guess it's leading me in the right direction, but huh." And she goes to him. Okay. You go ahead, Brad.
So, yeah, I think that they're a dyad. I don't know.
In the Force.
Yeah, I think they're a dyad. I'm gonna die ad on this hill. But really, you said force bond, and that like totally makes sense because there was also a part in the beginning when Axel is in the Rake's parlor, and somebody says to him like jokingly, like, "Are you sure you secretly aren't a Jedi?" And it's like an
And he's
offhanded
like,
comment, but I was like, I actually highlighted it because I was thinking to myself, well, I know he's holding lightsabers on the cover of the next book. So I'm like, there's like something's a little sus here. It is very possible Axel Greylark is force sensitive. And
I would
one,
say
that would
it's
make
even
his
probable.
dynamic very, very probable. Yeah. It would make his dynamic with the mother that much more interesting. Right. Cause like, you know, the mother, he sensed that like the mother saw something in him, right? Like, was she attuned to his force sensitivity potentially? And she saw that was somebody I need to tame or utilize as a
Control?
power, you know, control, right? He is somebody who's powerful. And also, yes, Gella hearing her name through the force, it's very like Luke and Leia, you know, like Luke is force sensitive, Leia's force sensitive. Like and she hears him calling out her name. Um, so I think there is something there between these two. For sure.
Yes. That's all I
And the
have to
fact too
say.
that like he feels her presence in the cell, like is he just saying that because he's thinking of her, or does he actually feel some sort of presence through the force? Like, are they going to see each other in like, okay, just imagine in Cataclysm, like they're just vibing on their own, and then like they like force connect, like Rey and
And
Kylo,
he's
you
like,
know,
"Do you
like
see my
they're
surroundings? I only see you."
yeah.
Mm.
She's like, why am I in jail? He's like, because I'm in jail. Now you're here with
Why
me.
am I in jail? He's like, "And this is the jail that I'm in. Do you want to come? Do you want to come by?" I don't have a cellmate.
Right. It's just me. It's
So
just me and my 16 copies of HoloNet smut that I asked for. My mother shipped to me. I told her it wasn't smut though.
that the mother shipped to me. Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know,
it's
like,
really too late for this. We have to go to bed.
but okay, but like actually though, like the book titled Cataclysm, what could be more powerful than a force dyad? Like potentially throwing everything for a loop. That could be really interesting.
A cataclysm is a large scale and violent event in the natural world or a sudden violent upheaval, especially in a political or social context. Early 17th century origin, originally denoting the biblical flood described in Genesis, from the French cataclysme, I don't know how to speak French, via the Latin from Greek, kataklosmos, deluge, from kata down, plus klusen to wash. It comes from, okay, that's actually really interesting though. Okay, we're looking at the etymology of the world is actually really interesting because we talk about Eiram and the dome and the floods and the weather a lot in this
On
book.
Dalna, yeah.
Oh no, on Dalna, but also on what, Eiram? The whole dome is keeping the waves out.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Interesting.
Anyway, etymology. Who thought we were going to be doing the etymology of the word cataclysm on this episode? Not me, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think there will be some sort of massive event that happens, but whether or
He does
not
not
they
think
have
it's going to be about a deluge.
a whether or not they have a dyad, I definitely am leaning towards Axel Greylark being force sensitive, and I think that would be really a fun angle to take with the character. So would add a lot of depth to him, certainly. Also, too, like the fact that he mistrusts Jedi. Like, imagine being one. Oh wow, like I'm force sensitive. Like I could have saved my father. Like I could have done something like better, different, you know, and like living with like a newfound guilt because of the knowledge that like you possess power. And then like, what do you do with that power, right? Like all who have power fear to lose it. So like, will Axel be tempted by the dark side, and will Gella be the one to bring him off that precipice? So who knows? Who knows? Lots of possibilities here, but as we look to the future, as we start to wrap up here, kind of some final notes. We talked a little bit about Creighton's son, and later in the book, during the wedding, Ada Fort shows up, who is a Nikto Jedi, and we know those are the two baddies on the cover. Not baddies, I just mean they're awesome baddies, not bad guys, but they're awesome. They're on the cover of Battle of Jeddah. They're going to be the two mainstays of the book. So I'm excited to spend more time with them, and I also love how Axel is speaking with the mother and how she's lurking in the background of this book, and she's sort of the larger chess player, moving all the pieces around to her liking. So I will be very interested to see what sort of mischief she's up to in Battle of Jeddah.
I'm honestly terrified of what the path of the open hand has in store. I really am. They're like a very, what makes them a little scary is they're kind of lowercase n normal, Like the Nile, which ultimately comes out of the path of the open hand, they're like capital E evil,
Right.
But the path, they're a lot more lowercase n normal. And that's scary because they can really go off a deep end there. And I think the mother is quite on that path with the poison and with the testing and with the nameless and with everything she wants, which are all bad, actually.
Well, while the path of the open hand may be unpredictable, we here are very predictable because we end every episode with our odds and ends.
You're so good
when
at
we
these
talk about
transitions
books
every time.
I know. We're going to talk about our odds and ends. So it's all the things that we didn't get to
Excellent.
in our discussion, but want to make mention of. So Sarah, why don't you kick us off with one of your odds and ends?
Did you know that Eiram-E'ronoh, which I will not say like the audiobook and other people pronounce them because I need them to be differentiated in mind. Eiram, and E'ronoh. Not Eiram, sorry. Hot take of the day. They're in the Dalna system.
Whoa.
They're in the Dalna system.
Oh. So I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Woof.
So the mother, she's like right next door, actually.
Neighbors.
But also they talk about in this book at some point, they go to one of the towns and there's not a lot of people there. And they're like, well, yeah, the path comes and recruits a lot of the young people. And I'm like, oh, no, that's interesting. Okay, that's it.
Right. And we learned about the children of E'ronoh, which we didn't really talk about, but that includes Farrell, the dude who's with the monarch. I'm blanking on the last name, but and there's sort of
Farrell's the last name.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, Rev Farrell, I think is his name. He's one of the driving forces behind some of the assassinations that are happening and wanting to out the monarch and Ziri and take over the throne. And she sort of sends him careening into the sea at the end of the book, and that's his death. But I wonder if they'll play a part at all in the future and to inspire more chaos on those planets. And how much of cahoots they're in with the path. So I want to make mention of the Timekeeper moon, which was once thought as the shared heart of these two planets when they emerged from stardust billions of years ago. And I'm just loving the sort of time, whatever you want to call it, era of Star Wars. So, yep, time grappler, Timekeeper moon, so I love that. Love that.
Right. Our king, Messy Boy Central, Axel Greylark, has degrees in agricultural economics and interplanetary politics from Rena University, an institution of higher learning here in our Star Wars galaxy. And he apprenticed in the Senate. And this quote, I don't know where it's from, but it says, and yet you choose to humiliate this family and yourself. And it was from his mom. And he says, we both know I have no shame, mother. Very iconic. Very rakish thing of him to say.
I want to make mention of Creighton when they're on the moon, the timekeeper moon. He grabs a piece of sediment off the ground, rubs it between his finger, and it tastes like salt. Made me think of The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi reference I didn't know I needed in the High Republic. So that was a doozy.
Yeah.
You gotta have balls to just go to a random planet and eat the ground. That's pretty ballsy,
Right. It's kind of a weird thing to do.
I know.
My next
strange world. It's fine. It's fine. You can go in my digestive tract, whatever. Why
Exactly.
not?
I am predictable, and we took an Institute of Higher Learning, but we also have a song to share. And that song is Your Love Sends Me to Level 9. That's
You
it.
know what I thought of?
That's the whole
I
comment.
was like,
Go
what's
ahead.
level 9? What's level 9?
Over
And I'm thinking,
9,000.
no, but I was thinking of like Narkina 5. I was like, your
Narkina
love
5,
sends me to
level 9.
level 9. Like,
No.
your love fries me.
No. No, no, no. See, and here I am like over 9,000. Like I'm like directly in like 2009 meme culture. But the other one here is 9 minutes in heaven. Who needs 7 minutes?
Ooh,
Why is 7 minutes in heaven when you can get 9 minutes in level 9?
extra 2 minutes. You never know. Never know.
So
Oh
sorry.
boy.
Oh, we should
Speaking
go to bed.
of music, the Chancellor has a podcast. I guess it's called Hollows from Malo, which I'm like, he's just like us for real.
He
Like
did
the
write that in the
alliteration,
notes.
the rhyme, the rhyming of it all.
Hollows from Malo. I get it. I
Oh
get
my
it. He
gosh.
is just like us for real.
But it also made me think, real talk. It made me think of FDR and his fireside chats during the onset of the Great Depression, and how he would have those on the radio. So that's kind of what I thought of initially.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair, I think, comparison. Mine just a note. This is not an odds or an end, but it's just a note. It's that I just really love ARK4, the protocol droid. We get a POV from her kind of early on in the book, and I was like, she's delightful. That's it. That's the whole note.
My note. I have a note as well. There are 2 tipsy Gungans at the wedding reception, which I really loved. The idea of like 2 Gungans who were like, let's just drink our asses off at the open bar. Like that's kind of cool. Good
You
for
know,
them.
I think everybody should utilize the open bar at the wedding.
Me too. It's
If
there.
they would like to, but yeah,
Yeah, right. No
yeah, yeah.
pressure. But like if
If
somebody
you
else is
partake,
paying
this
for it,
is right. Um,
do it.
right. Don't get too
Yeah.
crazy, but you can get a little crazy. You can get a little crazy if you want. Um,
Yeah. Just like
go
don't
for it.
blow up 3 towers or anything with vials of
Right,
poison, you know?
Axel.
Don't do that.
Anyway,
Anyways.
um, so I have a you were talking about the time stuff. The worlds, we have Eiram-E'ronoh, the corridor between worlds.
Ooh.
It's the path between the two of them. It's like, it's the world between worlds. I'm not saying it's like some third dimension, third plane of existence or whatever, but like I think the between worlds is interesting. And also just because the world between worlds has so much intrigue about it, corridor between worlds also has intrigue about it.
Interesting,
Mm.
interesting.
Mm.
Hmm.
My next one is also with the Jedi. When the Jedi die, I don't know if we've heard this before. They are cremated, and then they're cremated, and their crystal goes in the Kyber Arch. Hmm. Hmm.
Right, which is the Kyber
You
Arch
know,
is the thing that Reith Silas crosses, right? Or tries to cross and into the dark,
yeah,
I believe, right?
I believe
He
so.
tries to walk
Well,
across it. Yeah.
I'll be honest. I think that stuck out to me specifically. Like, I don't know if it has any like story importance, but it stuck out to me specifically because I lost somebody recently. And so now I'm just thinking a lot about death and funerary practices. And I just think that it's so interesting that obviously when possible, like their Kyber crystal is the piece of them, even though it's not a piece of them that is saved and remembered and stored together in community with others that are lost. I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like compared to what we just saw with Andor, how Marva's ashes were put into a brick and becomes part
Yeah.
of the foundations of the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I love. It's weird to say, like I love learning about the funerary practices of different Star Wars cultures and planets and peoples. Like it is interesting because it's like how do you treat your dead? How do you remember them? I
Well,
think that is very important as a culture to understand that, and also speaks a lot to how that culture functions.
I think it tells you a lot about community within that culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm right there with you.
Mhm. My last odds and end here is just the phrase "Who in the bowels of Coruscant." Um, I just love that. I'm gonna use that from now on. So if you tell me a name and I'm like, "Who in the bowels of Coruscant is that?" I
That's a
love
good
that.
one.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Remember the game that never existed, Star Wars 1313? Battles of Coruscant.
Hmm.
Yep. Anyway,
Yeah.
my last one is kind of a serious one. It's from Master Son, and it's just a quote, just something to leave on. And it says, "If the Force is a balance, so is peace."
Hmm.
That's all.
Fascinating. What do you make of that quote?
I think it's just really interesting because he's right in saying that, peace is not one end of the spectrum. It's right in the middle of, because it requires sacrifices from the parties who are attempting it. It requires communication and both sides, both extremes.
Upkeep.
Yeah, upkeep. Yeah, and both sides, both polar poles, of the spectrum have to come together and meet in the middle in order to achieve peace, in order to have that seesaw balance right in the middle and not tip.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point to make. Like, yeah, peace is not an end. It is a status quo. Peace comes and goes in a galaxy far, far away. As we know, right? The Jedi can be at the height of their powers in their golden age, and that peace can just as quickly be dismantled and thrown into turmoil.
By an anarchist who decided to explode a ship in hyperspace.
God damn it, Marcianro.
Yeah.
You know, we
Yeah.
talked a lot about
I can't
reuniting
fix
with
him.
Avar and Elzar, but
I
Marcianro has
really
gone off
don't
the deep
ever want to
end.
see him again. I understand that's a little bit controversial in some circles because some of them would consider him a member of our community of messy, messy boys. But honestly, I just don't want to ever see him again. I don't think I can fix him.
No, he's past the fixable. He's past the fixable stage, unfortunately. Axel
I
Greylark,
know.
though, fix him all day long.
Fix him all day. That's correct. Also, let's take a moment to acknowledge that we have 4 parts in this book, and they are the bargain, the fuse, the spark, and the capital C, collision. Thank you.
Collision. We got cataclysm.
Collision.
We got collision. We
Cataclysm.
got convergence. Creighton's son.
You know what? I really love it when Star Wars does this because I remember all I wanted from the Rise of Skywalker title was like, it has to be an action word and it has to start with an R. And then it was Rise, and I was like, yes. Because, Return, Revenge, Rise. That's exciting.
Right.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Rise of Skywalker. Love that title.
It's a good title. It's a good title.
Yeah, it is a good title. So that is our odds and ends. And that's the end of our discussion here on Convergence.
And that's the end of the episode. Bye.
No. Sarah, any final thoughts on the book that you haven't already addressed, or any closing thoughts for us?
I feel like we got to so much in this episode, and we really tangented into some speculating right off the bat. So I'm just looking forward to where this goes next. I feel like we're going to get some action-packed. It's going to really start being High Republic again with, death and pain shortly, I believe. So I'm looking forward to that. And by looking forward to that, I mean dreading it, but excited to read it, excited to read the words on the page and then immediately regret doing that afterwards.
Or I guess listening, because it's an audiobook. So
even about Cataclysm, I'm talking about all of it. I just think it's gonna go poorly. I just think it's gonna go poorly for our characters. But yeah, I think this story was really great. It took us away from what we expected in the High Republic, and I'm grateful for that because we love a change in pace to give us something new to explore new ideas and new ways. So yeah, great book. Thanks, Zoraida. Looking forward to the next one. And I love the High Republic a lot. I feel like I've said it all at this point. I'm just repeating myself.
Also, not to mention that we have another Cavan book coming up very shortly. So that's the one that's titled Path of Vengeance. So that's good. That's good.
No, we're not reading it. I'm sorry, Cavan. I can't do this again. I can't do it again.
Genuinely love you, Cavan, but also I'm so scared. Please don't come near me with your new book. But I love Convergence. I think it was a intimate look at several characters, and I loved that. And it's about defying a generation. It's about love igniting the stars, as Matthew Stover's Rot's novel, and it's a line that we always go back to, as that novel says. And I always love, for me, Star Wars. Star Wars is a story about love, and anytime that is incorporated into it as the thread of all threads, it's tapping into, I think that is a very easily relatable story for readers. So that's what I appreciated the most about this. And whatever's next for the High Republic, I think Convergence is like the end of it. It's like, war is over. It's like the John Lennon Imagine song, like we're all like, kumbaya, yay, peace treaty, marriage. It's great. Well, let me tell you, Sarah, at the Battle of Jeddah, the Beatles are breaking up. So I don't know. I don't know about this one.
And anyway,
although I think Imagine came out after the Beatles were broken up, but that's besides the point. Anyways,
don't have any idea of the Beatles timeline. I did not watch the 8 hours of Get Back. I'm so sorry. At the world,
still on my watch list. Maybe I'll do that this week.
I really don't know too much about Beatles history, actually. Sorry to the Beatles. sorry to the Beatles.
Well, I guess we're never guessing on our pod, so thanks. Well, if you want to hear more from us here at Friends of the Force, first off, thank you for listening to this episode.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you come for more episodes in the future on the High Republic, because this is the place to get your High Republic coverage. There are many of our other podcasts out there and blogs who are also doing it, so go check those out as well. But we love this
is a good
stuff.
Community.
Yeah,
of High Republic.
It's a very
people.
Good community. So you can check us out online on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube and Hive. Sarah and I are also on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Goodreads if you want to see what we're saying, what we're watching, and what we're reading. And if you'd be so kind, take a couple extra minutes out of your day to leave us a 5-star written review if you could. Subscribe to the show and drop a like wherever you're listening so people find our podcast and join the discussion.
We also have a Patreon where tiers start at just $1. And at $1, I write a newsletter every month. Sometimes a little late, most of the time a little late, but I get to it every month. So if you'd like to read that, that's over on our Patreon. And we are seriously so grateful for all of our patrons who seriously help make the show happen every time. So thank you to Amy, Brian, Cheryl, Clay, Danny, Davis, Deborah, Dylan, Huang, Jen, Knights of Ren, Leanne, Levi, Lucy, Lindsay, Rob, Saber Bouquet, Santa, Sky Talker, Steven, Tom, and Travis. We are very, very grateful for your support. And to everyone who takes the time out of their day to listen, thanks so much for joining us in the conversation. Glad to have you here. Please connect with us online so we can say hello to you on the internets. Internets? On the interwebs.
And also, if you are considering subscribing to our Patreon, we got episodes coming up about the High Republic comics. So that's the only place you'll hear us talk about those. But until that point, everybody, thank you all so much for listening. And until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Bye.